Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Witness and I'm your host, Quatrina Hossain. The Supreme Court today delivered its verdict on the situation in Karachi, which had horrified the nation in the months of July and August. Dozens of people were killed, more than 300 people died in a wave of violence that swept the entire city, and the most gruesome acts of torture were perpetrated on people. The Supreme Court in its judgment today talked about the fact that several bodies, up to 50 bodies, were found headless. Other bodies were tortured, found in gunny bags. And Karachi had been under virtual siege. Well, the Supreme Court had reserved its long order. The verdict has come out today, has been in the attention of the media all day today. And we are going to discuss the salient features of the verdict. But one of the main issues that pertains to the verdict is something that we need to also look at, which is the fact that the Supreme Court has given its recommendations. And those recommendations have to be absolutely, undeniably carried out by the provincial and the federal government. We are going to talk about what directives the Supreme Court has given, how many of them are doable. Allow me to introduce my guests here in the studio. My first guest is Shahnaz Wazir Ali. She's a member of the National Assembly from the Pakistan People's Party. My second guest today, Chaudhry Naseer Ahmed Bhutta, an MNA from the Pakistan Muslim League N. And I should of course point out that we will also be talking about the protest that was held by the PML-N today, both inside and outside Parliament. The PML-N, along with other political parties, including the PPP Share Power Group, the JUI, and a few others, marched to the President House, and there they delivered speeches, held a small sit-in outside the gates of the presidency before dispersing peacefully. So that also will come up in our discussions today. But first of all, I'm joined on the telephone by Mr. Athar Minallah. He's an advocate of the Supreme Court. Mr. Minallah, my first question will be to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. One of the criticisms, and let's start with the negatives first, one of the criticisms of the Supreme Court verdict is that some people are saying it didn't go far enough in giving direct, clear and doable instructions to the government. Mr. Minallah, are you still with me? I'm afraid we seem to have lost a line. We'll try and get him back on that today. But one of the interesting things, of course, Mr. Bhutta, why don't I start with you, because then we'll let Ms. Wazir Ali respond. I've got a few points of the Supreme Court verdict here in front of me, but one of the main things it says is that the political parties have to clean out the criminal elements within their ranks. But to me, the most crucial point that the Supreme Court has re-emphasized over and over again is that the police needs to be depoliticized.
Yes.
Do you think that's possible? I mean, I'm going to be really blunt with you. We know the political system and system that works in Pakistan, your party, People's Party, every political party. The police is used as sort of a personal army by political parties. Can we get rid of this culture?
I think with the passage of time it can be depoliticized, but this cannot be done quickly. With not a single shot, this process can be done.
Why not?
With the passage of time, I think the policy can be evolved. That the police can be, evolved a system wherein the police who are deployment of the police officials and recruitment of the police officials is supposed to be done purely on the basis of merit, instead of extending kind of grace to the various political components, that okay, if some police officials are needed to be recruited in the government agency are going to be beefed up, the police is going to be beefed up, then that it's supposed to be done from the political workers. I think this should be stopped.
This has to stop. I mean, I'm not going to name names here, but I've been covering crime and political violence practically all my life, and I know for a fact. Okay, I've just been told that Mr. Minallah has joined us, so let's get his opinion on the verdict. Mr. Minallah, thank you so much for rejoining us. A lot of people are saying that the Supreme Court verdict didn't go far enough. They were expecting a lot more from the Supreme Court. They were expecting names to be named. That hasn't happened. Do you think that the Supreme Court has done the maximum it could have in this situation?
You see, Supreme Court is the creation of the Constitution and is bound by the whatever the Constitution mandates the Supreme Court, but I think the Supreme Court has gone out of its way at a time when innocent people were being killed, and there seemed to be no government, there seemed to be no one to stop those killings. It was the Supreme Court which took that courageous decision to go and sit in Karachi, and every political party appeared before it. Every institution appeared before it. They gave them the briefings, and the outcome of the briefing is a judgment which truly reflects all the ills of our society. And unfortunately, it should not have been for the Supreme Court to do this. It only speaks of a failing society, of a state which unfortunately the world is terming it as a failed state, and yet the political parties and the government, it is their failure, but I feel it's the biggest failure of the society itself, because our values have finished. So unless as a society we make the political parties accountable and the government accountable, this judgment probably would not, because you see, your precise question was that there are various vested interests in the society. Some would want, or some wanted, the Supreme Court to go to the instead of doing unconstitutional acts. And
I'll be blunt, Mr. Minallah, if I can interrupt you. The Supreme Court actually says that there were a lot of people who came into the hearings and said that the MQM should be banned, and the Supreme Court said that this is not the job of the Supreme Court to do this. So yes, there were vested interests operating there, definitely.
Yes, and even about Article 245, the Supreme Court was very clear that it is not for the Supreme Court to ask the army to come in, it is the provincial government.
Right.
And that is exactly the interpretation of the Constitution. But at least the Supreme Court took this initiative and has given a judgment which has opened up a lot of things, have documented a lot of things. Now it is for the political parties, now it is for the government to come forward and to do something very, very constructive and positive rather than criticizing each other.
Okay. Now, one sentence that I'm going to, well, a portion of the judgment, a verdict, I want to read today, right now, and I'm going to take a little bit of time to do it because I thought it was very important. I'd like the take of all my guests over here on that. We may reiterate here that now it is not possible under the Constitution and law for the armed forces to dismiss the government by adopting extra-constitutional measures. Detailed reference in this behalf, if required, can be made to the only judgment of this court in Sindh High Court Bar Association's case. But at the same time, the chosen representatives also owe a duty to the Constitution. And if they feel that on any account of political expediency, they can allow the continuance of the present position of law and order in the province, it will be at their own risk and cost. Otherwise, under the Constitution, they are bound to secure lives and property, ensuring the proprietary rights, freedom of movement, etc., and failing which, constitutionally, such government is likely to lose their right of ruling. Explain this to me, will you please, Mr. Minallah? Is the Supreme Court actually saying that the government loses its right to rule if it fails to protect the people?
You see, what all we are discussing is actually a reflection of a failure not only of the government doesn't have that will. If it had that will, the same police force, and it's not just in Karachi, it's throughout in the country.
But is this a warning, Mr. Minallah? Is the Supreme Court putting the government on notice? Is the Supreme Court warning the government?
No, not really. You see, as I said, every political party, every institution was before the Supreme Court, was part of the proceeding.
All right.
Whatever came before the Supreme Court has just put it on paper,
right,
has recorded whatever has been revealed to the Supreme Court.
Right. All
now,
right.
If we, like ostriches, want to bury our heads and not face the reality, but this is the reality.
Absolutely. Mr. Athar Minallah, Advocate, Supreme Court, thank you so much for having joined me here tonight on Witness. Well, Ms. Wazir Ali, I don't know if I'm overreacting because I'm not a lawyer. Mr. Bhutta is, but I'm not. What do you make of this? Do you feel the Supreme Court is basically telling you, get your act together?
Well, Quatrina, I think a number of things have been said here today, and I would like to make some comment on some of these observations. Mr. Athar Minallah, I think, has, in his almost opening remarks, has said that it's unfortunate, but it should not have been the Supreme Court to take action on this matter. Now, clearly, I think even if a senior lawyer like him is saying that the Supreme Court should not be involved in things like this, and then the argument that he takes is that there's a total breakdown of the state and there's a failed state, and so therefore the Supreme Court has been almost pushed into this situation.
Wasn't it?
First of all, I would say that if the Supreme Court, which is part of the judiciary, and the judiciary is part of the state organs, so I would not like to call Pakistan a failed state by any means. Neither the judiciary, nor the media, which is the fourth pillar of the state, nor do we think that any of the governments represent a failed state, and I'll come to that in a minute. But to take this position that, oh, the Supreme Court really, I mean, there's so much pressure on the Supreme Court and therefore it is, you know, having unfortunately to do these things. This is an unfortunate situation. I should think the Supreme Court is strong enough to decide for itself what it should and it should not be doing. That's one. The second is, clearly, I think that the Supreme Court, having taken notice of the situation in Karachi, also got the full cooperation of the entire state apparatus, because what they documented and what they received, the information that they received, was received from various state parties.
Agencies, from joint IGIT reports.
So there's been no obstruction of justice in any way, manner or form by the government of Sindh or the federal government.
The Supreme Court has told the government, provincial and federal, that they failed to protect people.
Let me come to it. First of all, I want to come to the process. The process was that the Supreme Court asked the Sindh government to appear before it, the federal government, all relevant agencies, and to give it information which it received. So there was absolutely no, I think, effort on the part of any of the government, either federal or the government of Sindh.
So.
And the other thing is, I mean, we are talking about what they have documented. They've documented what they have heard. They are not going out into the streets to check what is the law and order situation on the streets, and certainly they cannot just look at a banner headline on a newspaper and make a judgment. So the government is functioning because the Supreme Court has accepted what has been given to it in terms of information and the record. That's the first thing. The other is clearly I mean, we all know what Article 245 states, and we know that this provides, in the event of a required situation, a civilian government can ask the army to intervene. However, we also recognize that this is totally the prerogative of the civilian democratic representative government. When we are talking about, you know, the state having to protect the lives and property of the people, which is absolutely right, we believe in it, and actually peace has prevailed in Karachi, Quatrina. Peace has prevailed in Karachi as a result of the political dialogue, not as a result of a Supreme Court judgment. I think this is very clear, and history will record this.
Okay.
This is not a result of the Supreme Court's direction or orders. The political parties came together.
The Supreme Court started hearing.
No, I wish to correct you. The violence stopped and reduced, and the situation began to return to normal when the political parties entered into.
But wouldn't you agree, Ms. Wazir Ali, that it should never have gone as far as it did?
I agree that it should not
You're
have.
From Karachi.
There can be no.
You know,
I am from Karachi.
We saw what happened.
Yeah, the fact is,
have happened.
it was a difficult situation. I think let us recognize the ground realities. The ground realities are that the demography of Karachi has changed. It is no longer predominantly one ethnic group city by any means. It has a significant Pashtun population, it has a significant Punjabi population and a Urdu-speaking population and a Baloch and a Sindhi population. Now the politics and the discourse of Karachi must reflect these new changed realities of the different segments of population.
Okay.
We like to call it a mini Pakistan. So a mini Pakistan has to work together. And I think one has to recognize that all the voices...
But your government is blameless for the violence.
I have not said that anybody is specifically to blame or anyone's blameless. I am talking about a ground reality situation.
Okay.
I am talking about the various parts of the state machinery and of the constitution and of the responsibility. And by the way, talking about a responsibility of a provincial government to protect the lives and property of citizens, I would like to know on what basis did a certain party of the largest province in Pakistan actually give directions to its workers to go out there and join the angry mobs and the protesters. I mean, where is the line of distinction? You know, where is that line being drawn?
Does a sitting government by the PML-N,
does a sitting government
referring to?
in a province tell its own people that you go out and protest and